I didn't want to make the kind of movies that were happening. And it was Lucky early, and Lucky had been in school with me in Bombay's College. And they said, oh, this guy will never make it. What is this kind of music? Hey sir, kya keh rahe? Ye to kuch nahi hoga. A lot of my good work was for both cigarette companies and alcohol companies. Shit advertising for great products. I wouldn't tell a youngster today to join advertising.
No.
And now here it's going to be controversial. Hi, I'm Mahesh Mathai. I'm not talkative, but today I'm going to be creative and talkative on this lovely show by Ketki Tewary called Creative Talkative.
Welcome to Creative Talkative with Ketki Tewary.
Yeah, we're creative and talkative. There's no stopping this, there's no topping this. Time to explain what's in our veins, what's in our minds. Take a peek into these lives. Yeah, we're creative and talkative. There's no stopping this, there's no topping this.
We're truly excited to have you on Creative Talkative. You have reshaped the landscape of Indian advertising. You've changed the music scene, been responsible for the success of so many brands, so many singers, gone on to make very impactful cinema, and now you're doing that with OTT. But for some reason, you've always only focused on your work, put your head down and work, never spoken about it. Was that a conscious decision, or did you always want to be behind the scenes?
Well, I was behind the scenes. I don't know if it's a conscious decision, but again, it's not something I sought out. I didn't go looking for the sort of limelight in a sense. And in a way, when you were in advertising, especially because that's where I learned everything I did, you were behind the scenes anyway. You were recognized within your industry, and what was interesting was, when you met people from the film industry and other places, and they said, you know what, you do all this work and you don't get recognized. So as far as I was concerned, if the people in advertising sort of recognized what you did, that was enough. By nature, I'm probably not that person who will go out and seek publicity. The age has also changed, especially in the last, I would say, since social media has come in, to self-advertise and to be in there, even if you're not good at it or even if you don't want to do it, to survive in today's, I think, any world, especially media, advertising, entertainment, music, all of these things, you better go out there and shout about it. Otherwise, you're not going to, you're not going to be known.
But I don't think you even realized, right, that you were creating history with the kind of work you did.
Well, I definitely didn't think one was creating history at the time when we were doing it. What was interesting was being able to find the opportunity and the partners to be able to express those things, because you can be creative, you can have ideas. If you don't have the clients willing to buy, or the agency or creative people willing to walk with you and do that, then you don't get there.
How was it growing up? What was childhood like? What are the kind of influences that you remember, early childhood?
Grew up in Bandra, went to a Bombay College, which is a school in Mahim, not far from, and a lot of people in Bandra did that.
Yeah.
But the growing up in Bandra, there's still some parts of Bandra that have that Bandra left, okay, but most of it is gone. And it's not just the construction, a whole lot of people. Bandra was such a beautiful place, continues to be such a beautiful place. The multicultural aspect of Bandra still continues to be, and I would say in the last 20 years, multinational too. There's a point past which if you wipe out stuff, then it'll become just a bunch of tall buildings, and I hope that doesn't happen to Bandra.
When you went to college, you thought it was a waste of time. You didn't enjoy college that much. So what is it that you really wanted to do? Because back then there were no opportunities to do anything creative in terms of studying as a course.
I knew I didn't want to be an engineer or a doctor. I knew that much. What I wanted to be, I didn't know. So, I enjoyed growing up, reading, the arts, geography, all that kind of thing. I was not a science person. Yes, I still look back and think college was a complete waste of time, but I absolutely enjoyed myself. I didn't go to class. I went to Wilson College. So the whole journey of what we call coming to town, you know, from Bandra,
Correct.
getting the train, going to Grant Road, you know, so getting exposed to what we call town at that time. Bombay, you know, in the 70s
Right.
was a wonderful place to grow up, and it was quite a cool city. I guess I enjoyed wasting 3 years of college, and then I got interested in photography and you know, when you went to the movies, ads used to play, and I thought, wow, this is an interesting, you know, this kind of photography, something that's interesting, and I looked around, and the only place to study this was the Film Institute in Pune, and I remember applying for it, and I was really heartbroken when I didn't get in. The people who interviewed me were Shyam Benegal and people like that, who went on later to become not just mentors but friends, you know, and he says that's the best thing I did.
And yet, what is interesting is that it didn't stop you, right? It seemed to have sparked a different kind of a drive. Can you tell us how it shaped your creative outlook and how it fueled your journey in film and advertising?
What was interesting is when I came back, I looked around for a job, and when I did get a job, it is, you know, you become an apprentice, okay? And so what I was doing was learning the craft of filmmaking, or whatever the bits that go into that, in a hands-on working way.
Correct.
And what the people who got into the institute were learning that in a much more theoretical way. And they got to see international cinema every day. You know, 3 years, 4 years, they lived in Pune at the Film Institute, and every day they watched a film, and that's something you cannot make up for.
Correct.
You can't, and that's the
Yes.
one thing which I truly miss. But craft-wise, I learned, you know, it was a different path there. You know, so you know, it's very interesting because by the time I was 3 years at work, I had learned a lot of stuff on hands-on. You know, 2 years of work hands-on, which the guys in theory were going to come out and start. I got a job with a company called Genesis, which was Prahlad Kakkar.
Correct.
But he was away doing, I think, credits for a film for Ramesh Sippy, sorry. You know, one of the big movies. He was doing
Right.
something in the UK. He was away, and I met his then partner Mandeep Pecker, who's passed on since, sadly. But he said, "Hey, hang out. Wait till Prahlad comes. You can hang out at the office." And I remember it was about 3 or 4 months before Prahlad came back, and I was already working. I was already in the system, learning how to edit, learning from all the people, and those were good learning years because I was learning a lot of the nuts and bolts of filmmaking directly,
Absolutely.
you know, from the people who were doing things.
They always say that before you become a filmmaker, you should be an editor, because then there's, you know, then you can truly hone the craft in that sense. So,
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's one thing in particular, but yeah, I do believe that if you learn it from the absolute basics,
absolutely.
then you know how film works, okay? And then the technology can change, you can get digital, you can, you know, things can change, but the basic
Crux remains.
basic craft remains the same, because there's a lens and there's, you know, your picture's captured and you cut the picture and it works at 24 frames a second or whatever, 25, or, you know, all of those things. Or the technology can change a lot, but the bricks are still the same, you know, and that's something which I'm very, very glad that I learned at the time that I did. Shyam Benegal, Govind Elani used to be a regular because he was shooting all that stuff. So I was getting exposed to very interesting advertising and this kind of cinema, okay? So I was very far away from Bollywood, so to speak, and that was my world. I said, my God, this is great cinema. And with advertising, we were using, you know, great equipment and great, you know, so technologically it was very advanced.
When did you start highlight on your own?
In about 3 years of working with Prahlad, I was reasonably confident, and I remember people saying, yeah, you know, that's pretty young to be, you know, and I thought, you know what, I think I can.
How old
And if
were
it
you
doesn't, I was 22. Okay.
Oh, okay.
And I said, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I'll go back to work. You know, that's what I told Prahlad, in fact. And in those years, there was advertising for cigarettes, alcohol, everything, and I've done my share of all of those. In fact, a lot of my good work was for both cigarette companies and alcohol companies. And they were launching a brand called Chancellor cigarettes, which was a dark brown cigarette, if you remember smoking.
The Pataudi film.
That's right. So that was the first film I ever did.
Okay.
I remember being really excited, and it was, there was Pataudi and all of that. And I remember telling him, it's my first film, so sort of bear with me and forgive me if there's a problem. Right. He said, don't worry, it's my first film too. It was supposed to be Pataudi as Pataudi, as this Nawab, and that sort of royal sort of feel with well-dressed people, very stylish. This guy would come, or his bearer with white gloves would come and have this thing, and Pataudi was talking to somebody, supposed to turn around, pick up the cigarette, and the guy lights it, and he blows out the smoke, and that was the end of the thing. And he would keep getting the cue wrong. I don't know if you. Film was very expensive. You didn't roll like the way we roll now.
Yeah.
You cut very quickly because it was very expensive. And then we were just carrying on doing takes, and then Prahlad looked at me and says, "Son, come here a second." He said, we're doing this, and the guy who's coming with the tray and the cigarettes is on my blind side. I don't have an eye on this side. And I said, I know that, and I was mortified. Okay, but it was just quietly. He wasn't making a big noise, and he said, so give me a cue that I can do this, so I can turn, because he's appearing on my and it's so, and that's my first film. And of course, everyone knows Pataudi. Everyone knows that he has one glass eye, but it's not something you can't tell. You can't tell when you are with him. You couldn't tell. And what is really interesting is all my cricket friends later said, "Oh shit, you should have known, man." I said, "Yeah, I should have known, but by the way, which eye do you think it is?" And nobody got it right. Nobody got it. Even the people who know that he had it in a cricketing accident don't know which eye it is. And I know which one it is, but it's a discussion that people still will not. And you can get cricket experts, and they will not necessarily know which one it is.
Before Cadbury's, the way I see it, was ad films were meant to be very proper, and they had to. You never saw anyone really having fun and letting go. And I think with Cadbury, what we saw was phenomenal.
It's very interesting, but agencies in those years did storyboards. They did, that was how things were sold. They did animatics. I don't know if people do those things anymore.
Yes, of course, animatics. I remember.
And you did animatics. You cut footage from international stuff. You did a lot of things which I don't know if people do now. And so when the ad was written, it's nice. Okay, guys, his girlfriend is in the audience. He's going to, he's batting. He's got one run to make, and he makes it, and great. And Piyush was cricket. Piyush was all about cricket, and so that was this great moment. Now, on paper, it's cool, it's nice, but it's at best a nice script. Okay, a happy, nice story.
Correct.
Okay, and that's all it was going to. It could be. You can't. There's nothing. There's nothing more you can really do than that. Okay, and the only way to elevate it was to be able to get a performance. And I remember those years. There was this new lens that was around. It was like a 500. You see it a lot now. I loved it. I loved it because it was. It was a beautiful Canon lens. And so we were actually across the cricket ground. Okay, so you could go very, very far from your performers, and that's one of the things I did then, because it allowed whatever was going on. There was no camera. It was not like this. Okay,
correct.
It was literally, imagine the other side of a cricket ground. So you let the actor do what they want. Okay, and that's what I told this young Shimon. I said, you just let go. You don't worry. And you literally, when a camera is across the other side of a cricket
couldn't
field,
see the
you know,
camera also.
it's
Correct.
not that you can't see it, but you're not at all aware of it.
Of course.
It's a really tiny thing, and I think that's really what let this girl, let Shimona, let go completely. And there's nobody who can. There's no director who can tell an actor to do
Correct.
that. No, that's got to come out from
Absolutely.
you know, and that lives till today. You know,
Yeah.
that one shot of her, because it's actually, even though it's cut separately, it's one continuous shot of her getting off the stands, coming down, dodging the guard,
Correct.
running onto the field. You know, that whole thing it's one
Right.
continuous shot, and it was done. And you said, what, ek hi take? I said, we'll shoot another one.
But
You know what? You saw what? You saw that. I don't think I can't. There's nothing I can tell her to do. I think last year, 25 years, Bob had called me. I think was it early? Yeah, it was last year. They did a.
And they remake, which was my next question.
Yeah.
That did you see that, and what did you think about that?
Now here it's going to be controversial.
No, I mean, it could be your
What's
opinion.
interesting is I had a call from Bob, who's a wonderful filmmaker and a friend, really great filmmaker. He said, listen, I got to apologize. So I said, Bob, you're calling me to apologize for what? He says, no, I'm going to remake the ad. So I said, you don't need to apologize. I said, who's the agency? He says, everything the same. I said, everything the same. A little later, I get a call from Piyush too. He says, we're going to make this ad. I said, why? He says, it's been 25 years. So I said, leave it alone. You know. I mean, of course, joking. And then he told me the story, and I thought, good luck. It doesn't sound great to me. He said, no. And then there's the, you know, it's not. I said, a boy and a girl. 25 years later, you got to do better than a boy and a girl. You know, flipping the boy and a girl. There's got to be more than that, in my opinion. But try it. Let's see. Who knows? Bob might, you know, do some, you know, sort of magic with it. And then later on, he said, oh, you know, the boys are third. I said, look, for me, that's not going anywhere. Let's see what happens. And so they made it. They, of course, they put so much hoopla around it. They call it a huge success.
Did you think that if this came to you
Yeah.
and you had to redo it, what would you do?
What would I have read? I would have been under immense pressure.
है ना?
I would have been under immense. I would have been shitting bricks. I said, you know what? I would have flown that girl back from wherever she is and had the original two. But now you have to write a story, whether it's that kid's on it or there's
Of
one
course.
girl, there's whatever. But I would have brought the original two back wherever they were. That would have been magic for me. You know, if you had brought back those two in some form, not playing cricket, at a cricket match. So it would have had to be rewritten, but it would have had to. I'll tell you, it would have had to be talked about in the manner that the earlier one was talked about. Okay. Now, what happened with the 25-year-old? After 25 years, for a month everyone talked about it. They said, oh wow, remake. It was a little controversial. Some people said, oh, we like the old one, we like the new one, oh, whatever. People liked it, whatever it may be. But 2 weeks later it was forgotten. If somebody said, you know, do you want to do the original Give Me Red ad again, I would think, would I do it? If we crack the script, yes. Otherwise, just to do it, no, because you're stepping into the shoes of or whatever you want to call it, of a legendary, you know. So what the new ad was doing was stepping into the shoes of the original. Okay.
Correct.
Sometimes maybe you shouldn't attempt it. Sometimes you just give it a tribute and say, you know, this is who we are. 25 years later, this whatever. Don't try to remake an ad. You know.
So let's talk about, of course, Gimme Red and Vareli.
So Vareli for me was probably one of my most exciting, personally gratifying ads. Garden Silks was a rediffusion account, and they'd been doing stuff for a while. They had great print ads, as I said. Arun Kale was done these beautiful, you know, layouts for color layouts and created new ground with those. You know, like color pictures all the way to the edge, no edges. You know, so all of that's very new, and it's interesting. Vareli is actually a place not far, you know, in Gujarat where they come. Well, some of either there's a factory or something that they have that the brand Vareli comes from there, and she wanted to create something for a new age woman, and there was no agency at that time. So we would go there and sit there and talk about stuff, and we came up with this idea about this woman who goes looking, and you don't know what she's looking for, and we managed to get Persis Khambatta, who was just a name for us, a legend, Indian woman who'd gone from India and made it big.
Correct.
And she just moved back and she agreed to do it, and believe me, that ad of her just walking across a beach, I mean there were 2 ads we did. The one was that, which was very path-breaking, because they said, wow, this is a woman who's has a lover of her own. So in advertising in India at that time, it was unheard of to have something like that.
Correct.
We also did another ad which we went to Nepal for,
Okay.
and that was about this. You couldn't do an ad like that because it would seem like stalking today. Okay, but there's this guy who's following her around, and he sends her a note which says, "You fascinate me," and that became very popular with the college boys and girls. Because it was sort of suitably romantic at the time, and I remember both of those. There was no agency, and therefore the whole creative process was between the client and
you.
And myself. So and ourselves, all of as a group. And that was really gratifying because it did well for the brand. It did well. We won lots of awards. We won advertising awards. So that for me was a very, very early years of feeling that one has done something original.
You had seen some stuff internationally and it had an impact on you, or it was some kind of an influence that made you create these kind of visual stories the way you did it.
So I came in at the time when cinema advertising was still there, and then it was moving to television. Okay, so when I worked with Prahlad, television was still black and white. Television was turning to color at the time. So ads for the cinema were in color. Ads for, because stock was so expensive, negative was so expensive, we did ads for television in black and white. They would say, television is a close-up medium, and that was, everybody was, and sure, it was a close-up medium, everyone was, and I would think, no, go the opposite, So I would use, there was an interesting lens called the 9.8, which was it's an old, I mean, it's still around, you'll see it on those old 35mm cameras, and I would love it, and I would, always the rental companies would say, whenever I was shooting, bring out those old big lenses, and so I was never scared of
experimenting,
of opening it up, and then that became a sort of visual language that I got associated with. So I started getting a lot of work that was travel work, so a lot of my scripts that I would get would be where there would be big landscapes.
The way you portrayed women visually, it opened up a very different sort of carefree. It brought out, I think, and that was also the time. So I think it brought out the so-called modern Indian woman, a woman who's not afraid to explore and beauty in a very different sort of a way.
Nobody was alone. You were doing this. There was also a wave of women being portrayed in advertising slightly differently. So I'm glad to have been around. I don't think I sort of necessarily was part of pioneering it in that way. I mean, I did the relaunch of Kame and stuff like that. So Sushmita Sen, all of those things. But they very quickly realized that, hold on, I don't know, I'm not. And hair commercials and soaps and all of that was just coming into India in a way that money was being spent. There were international hair specialists coming from Singapore. All this whole game. I mean,
Yes.
And I said, no, I said no cosmetics, no hair, no, straight out of it. You
had a very special relationship with music. So let's begin by talking about how you completely changed how music videos were made. How did this entire thing with Lucky Ali and Suno and all that happen? Because I think when that released, it was like such a breath of fresh air. Of course, followed by Neeraj Sridhar and Bombay Vikings and everything you did for them.
So I remember we were in 4D Studios in Vareli, and they said we were doing this recording, and they said somebody's come to see you, and it was Lucky Ali, and Lucky had been in school with me in Bombay College. He had become a not become. He used to play the guitar and sing songs and stuff, not composing or anything, but just So I knew he did a bit of music. He said, "Okay, I've just done this album, and will you listen to it?" So I said, "Yeah, great." He said, "I want to make a video for this." So I said, "Cool, let me finish my stuff." He says, "Okay, great." Took his CD and went off, and all the people around the studio, I don't remember if there was an agency or just engineers and stuff like that, and they said, "Oh, this guy will never make it." I said, "Kyun?" I said, "What is this kind of music?" And that was very different from what popular Hindi music, which was movie music, was like. So I said, "But it's really nice, yeah. It's nice to have a different arrangement, a different feel." "Nahi sir, kya keh rahe? Ye to kuch nahi hoga aise." I said, "Anyway, whatever, fine." Anyway, so Lucky calls me the next day and says, "Listen, let's do this video." I said, "Yeah, sounds good, He says, "The only thing is, there's no money." So I said, "There's no money means what? Video with no money?" He said, I've been going around with this CD everywhere to all the labels and nobody is. In fact, ABCL had just started. He said Amitabh Bachchan has been listening to it and all the, But they said, "Yaar, video banana padega." That's how I've come to you. So I said, video banana hai, but it costs money, brother, So I said, "What's your deal with BMG?" He says, "I produced the album, I'm giving it to them, and we're going 50-50 on the income, or whatever it makes." So I said, "Do you want to try something?" Thinking I'll just send him off. I said, "Go and tell them, split it 3 ways." BMG says, "Yes. We'll do a 3-way deal. We'll do a 3-way deal where we will market it and print and whatever, sell, because at that time it was cassettes. And you've given the music, you've given the albums, and if Mahesh Mathai does a video." So I said, "That's interesting." Just getting this, idea to go to Egypt, did this video, made up the story on the thing, went to Egypt, shot all that, really great fun. That album launched, it went on to become a super hit. It launched Lucky Ali's career.
Absolutely.
That Channel V and MTV and all had just launched. It won, I won a whole lot of awards. Channel V, ad of the year director, music video of the year. Lucky Ali won our best artist, all of that. And Lucky became huge after that. But what's interesting is, till today, I own 1/3 of that album.
Wow.
And every January, a check for some 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 rupees will come. But it'll come as my revenue, as earnings on that album of 91 or whatever it was. I was doing a lot of stuff with Rediffusion, and I remember this friend of mine, Amba Tihala, who said, "Oh, there's this guy we've heard who's passing around these tapes, and he lives in Sweden, lives in Stockholm, and his name is Reedar Sridhar, and he's got this, he does these old Hindi songs, And I heard it. I said, this is fantastic, I said, this really sounds weird. I don't know about the rights of all of this stuff, but you know what? I'll because I was doing stuff with Sony. Took Neeraj there. And we used to record in what is called not the famous that but there was a film center in Tardeo. There was this where R.D. Burman used to do all the music used to get recorded there, and we'd get time only after the movies so at 6 p.m. when R.D. finished. And Louis Banks was the new guy who just moved from Calcutta, and he was doing all the keyboard stuff for R.D. and all the guys at that time. So we'd go and hang out. So hanging out with musicians, was a great privilege that I thought, and I wish I were, but these were super talented musicians. So I was always close with musicians,
And therefore the natural progression was Blue Frog. So
one of the natural progressions was Blue Frog, because by the time we got to Blue Frog, I knew a lot of the music industry anyway through having worked with them. You know, Ehsaan-Loy, Shankar, Ashu, Dhruv, Louis, Ranjit, all of these guys were people that I'd spent time with in studio.
Jazz by the Bay was there before
Yeah.
Blue Frog, but when Blue Frog happened, it was, I think, the first of its kind, live music and also the way it was made, design-wise. I think the
Yeah.
first time when we saw it, because it was this industrial warehouse space,
Yep.
and the first time I went there, I was really intrigued by the round
The spots and-
circular
yeah.
seating.
It was a wonderful project to have worked on, but the reason, coming back to what you said, the reason all of us got together and did it was, we said, Bombay is the entertainment capital
Right.
of India. Bombay is the music capital of, when I say music capital, for publishing, for the music companies, television, all the musicians, all the singers, the top talent of the country is here. But if you want to go out and listen to music somewhere, there was Jazz by the Bay. So it was something that was sorely lacking in Bombay, and I think that time has come again. It's, there aren't enough places that you can go and hear live music, and the musicians are there, the singers are there, they're all standing up every day in Bombay, like the movie actors business.
So please tell me that Blue Frog is reopening.
Oh yeah, we're talking about that right now, and hopefully early next year you should see the Blue Frog coming back.
Moving on to feature films. So you decided to tell the Bhopal gas tragedy story with Bhopal Express, and it has won numerous accolades. Did you also make it the way you made it, because it didn't look like a mainstream Bollywood film?
I was doing really well in advertising. I was getting a little disillusioned with some of advertising, and that was starting to shift into the kind of advertising that you're seeing a lot of now, which was much more sales driven and much more, you were starting to see movie stars being used. When I was doing ads, there were no movie stars. Everything was not celebrity driven. You had a script, okay?
Right.
And when it started becoming, you'd get a call and say, are you free next month, 20th and 21st, for what? Oh, so-and-so is free to shoot an ad. Let's say, what about the script? Don't worry about the script, are you free? And I thought, okay, now maybe this is
Time to do
this is
something else.
time to look at other stuff. As part of advertising, I'd go to LA quite a lot, and I'd, for shoots and stuff. And I met this producer called Deepak Nair, who was of Indian origin and done really well in America. And he said we should work together. We got on, And I remember him saying, he says, listen, has anything been done about Bhopal at all? It's one of the world's biggest. So I said, no, I know it is one of the world's biggest tragedies, but nothing has, and let me go back and look at it. So I guess I was ready to do something more than advertising. I didn't really fit into Bollywood the way it existed, in that I didn't want to make the kind of movies that were happening. Not because they were bad or anything, but they were not my scene,
Right.
The kind of cinema I wanted to make wasn't really happening. So I said, Deepak, let's try something. And so that's an interesting time. And in fact, when I did a lot of the research and got the story, the guy I went to was Piyush. I said, Piyush, come on now, you need to help me too. So Piyush and Prasoon actually wrote the screenplay for the first film I was going to make, which was Bhopal Express. Very interestingly, the music was done by Ehsaan and Shankar, advertising people who I'd worked with. I was doing all my ads with them.
Correct.
And Shankar, who used to sing a lot of ads. In fact, Ehsaan-Loy were doing the music, and Shankar was doing so much voice stuff that by the end of it, Ehsaan said, listen, we need to give him a credit. Do you mind if we add him and make it Shankar-Ehsaan-Loy? I said, up to you guys. Yeah.
Oh, so it happened then.
That's the first Shankar-Ehsaan-Loy credit for a film is Bhopal Express. I wasn't expecting it to do well here, But there seemed to be an international audience that more than any accolades, it opened the Berlinale 2000, okay, which is the 50th year of the Berlin Film Festival. And that for me was fantastic, you know, going to Berlin with the film and seeing this whole world of that kind of cinema.
The Real Kashmir Football Club, which is soon to be released on OTT. So did your love for rugby have anything to do with it? Because not everyone knows that you have always had a great love for rugby and that you were the chairman of the Indian Rugby Football Union. So tell us about how that came about and what about the OTT medium got you excited?
It's very interesting. Rahul Bose is doing a great job with rugby in India now, really pushing it out well. But before he was the president of Rugby India, I was so plugging in. And plus I've been going for international rugby and and playing it for years and years and years. But that's part of a natural affinity for sports. Okay, so I guess when the people who originated this, they wanted somebody who knew sport and cinema, I guess, and I'm very happy that I was the name that they came to. But in 2022, because it's really it's not just working in a new format, which is a long form, but it's working with a subject that I love and in a place that I love. What fascinated me besides the sport side of it, it was a human story about everyday Kashmir. You know, we keep forgetting that there is, there are people who live there who lead normal lives, who love, who live, who have hopes, who are sad, so in all of that, and whatever the situation, life sort of goes on, and people are positive, and there are wonderful stories, and it's not they're not no different from us. What's beautiful about the story is how different Kashmir is, but you know what's more beautiful is how same it is. Football in Goa, we all know. If you say football in Kerala, we all know. You say football in Punjab, Punjab all sports, okay. If you say football in Bengal, we all know. So, and you'll think, they've been playing, they're used to it. We never think of that in Kashmir. But football was around, and Kashmiris have been playing football forever, okay, and very naturally for the Indian team, for all of that, and it's just something we don't know, and through all the strife and the unrest and all of that faded away, and that's what this wonderful story is. But these two guys used to think, let's bring football back,
Wow.
And that's really what it's about. In fact, the one of the greatest lines is in the story is, let's bring football back to Kashmir, which they do. And when I saw Netflix and Amazon and this long form, Sony and all of this, the early years, I said, this is a format I like, because it is, even though it's a writer's medium, there's breathing space for actors, there's great space for directors to really, do stuff, We're going to get some of our best storytelling in India in these, long form storytelling.
What, according to you, are the, say, 2 or 3 things that don't change irrespective of the medium?
Nothing changes. Let me start with it. First of all, nothing changes. The way stories are told are starting to change, and people's interests are starting, so what's happening with OTT, I feel, or with streaming platforms, is it's telling long stories. So it is actually eating into people, who used to read. I used to read a lot more than I do now, So that's sort of shifted on to watching longer stuff. I don't believe storytelling is going anywhere. So, and the fact that it's a visual medium, that's here to stay. You can change the cameras, you can change all of that, but I don't think the visual or film storytelling, that's going nowhere.